Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kind for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Folks, we got two important interviews that I did at Netroots. Very important interviews. One has to do with AI. One has to do with, well, I'll let you see that. It's Tim Wise. That's all I'm going to call his name out. Tim Wise is a very smart dude. But I think we're going to get started with Michael Rogers, who is the publisher and co-founder of RawStory. I know you guys have heard of RawStory. That you get emails from RawStory every day, many emails from RawStory every day with all the stories that they put out there. But anyhow, we got a lot to talk about. Before we get started, though, E2247 is in the house. Welcome, E2247. Eric Hayes from Kingwood, Atascocita is in the house. Paul Fleming from Powder Springs, Georgia is in the house. We also have in the house with us, let's see. I don't want to see anything from Hannity in this chat, my brother. Hannity is not a reliable source at all. So don't put anything from Hannity in here at all. Now, let's see what else we got here. Eric Hayes is in the house. May Wood from California, Long Beach, California. God, my mind is going. Melanie Keelan from Barcelona, Spain. Lee Grant from Montgomery County, Texas. Paul Fleming from Powder Springs, Georgia. Bridge MCP from Binghamton, New York. Steigen Bergen Creek. Thank you for helping me out. She's from Portland, Oregon. We also have in the house the one, the only, the beautiful Yvette Avery Herod. You blew my mind, Yvette, with that Instagram or TikTok where you went out there and you show it, girl. You show that you are in command. Real good, my friend. Enjoyed it. Anyhow, hey, for anybody who want to know what a real labor activist leader looks like, we have her in the house, Yvette Avery Herod. Thank you for what you do, young lady. Michael Rudnan is back with us. He says, got painters here redoing the walls. Been here since morning. Guess I missed two in a row. Oh, you will be missed, Michael Rudnan. We like to have your voice in here, my brother. But you go take care of what you got to take care of first, brother. You got to take care of make sure those walls are nice, painted, and beautiful. All right, let's see if we got started correctly with E2247, if he has all the information in the house. He says, day 327 of the war equal at least 40,534 Gazan kill, 637 persons more than day 311, at least 93,778 wounded, 1,626 persons more than day 311, 134,312 casualties. We also have that it's 134,000 casualties equal 411 per day. Estimated population 2,300,000. It's about 5% of the total Gazan population, which means 40,476 Gazans killed, means about 124 per day are killed, and 79% are kids and women. Were U.S. to be in that situation of Gaza now, 10.8 months into genocide by Israel, U.S. has a proportional killed and injured total of 19,680,321. That is shameful, and I think about a third of that would be dead. Think about those numbers, folks. Think about those numbers. You can't just let this go by. Yesterday, I got a call from a person in a place that I'm associated with. And this person said, and I mean, it kind of hurt me to the core knowing this person, knowing that this person is crabbed, and yes, this person says some off the wall things and so forth. But to hear that this person said, I don't agree with you guys anyway, all those people are a whole bunch of, and I'm paraphrasing, all those people are cockroaches, and it won't be over until they're all dead. You know, when you have people that you're associated with, you know that they have a modicum of racism in them. You know they have a modicum of prejudice in them, but you don't expect that kind of vile. And you know, Donald Trump made a lot of things palatable. That you can say a lot of things some people may just be thinking, but now you can say it. But he also unleashed a kind of inhumanity. He unleashed a kind of inhumanity that doesn't leave those that practice it with any remorse. He left a inhumanity that makes you forget you have family. He left an inhumanity that warps your mind, that no longer thinks morally of the things that you once thought were moral, that you forget you have kids and that they look up to us for a moral compass. This hits close to home. It hits close to home because for those who believe in humanity, believe in you, we are a village, believe in your fellow man, fellow woman, fellow person, when when you hear that kind of vile, not once, not twice, but repeated, and even when given the opportunity to say, nah, that I just said that off the top of my head or whatever, don't take that opportunity to do it. What was unleashed in this country from the vile, disgusting, thuggish, felonious, misogynist, sexist, xenophobic disease that Trump represents is dangerous. And this cycle, we need to extricate it from our society. We need to get it by the head. We need to make sure MAGA dies a natural death of attrition, of shame. We need to make sure that the shame they feel, and I hope many of the kids, the smart kids of these people who maintain their allegiance to this felonious thug, I hope, I hope that the shame that they feel will cause them to atone. I hope it will cause them to atone. All right, let's see. Carl Cox from Riverdale, Georgia. I did remember that, Carl, but I just didn't scroll down to your name yet. Riverdale, Georgia, brother Carl. Paul Fleming says Fox's Jesse Waters jokes about VP Harris getting raped while he openly supports a rapist. Business as usual for MAGA. It's shameful, Paul. These guys have allowed Donald Trump's evil to lobotomize them. And you know what? Their kids are going to remember. We are going to remember when this goes off, when they start to think again. The one thing I hope, because what hurts to the look, if I disappoint my daughter, it hurts me to the core. Well, actually, I haven't disappointed her, so I've never felt that hurt. But I know that I do a lot of, I mean, I love her so much that I know love set me straight, right? Uh, when she asked, when she said, you know, can you believe that people would vote for that guy who has daughters? Who has daughters? You know, I mean, think about it. Think about it. It's shame, and I hope those children, if any young millennials, young Gen Zs, young Gen A's listening out here, when the fever is over, hold your parents who have voted for this felonious thug, rapist, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. But and for those of us who are sensible enough to vote appropriately this election, let's make sure that we beat these thugs so badly that people start to run from it. Let's make sure. Let's make sure. Let's make sure. All right, Bridge MCP said Berto Willis trying to show favor with military when he constantly puts them down. Didn't go well. Fresh controversy brews over Trump's Arlington National Cemetery visit. Members of the Trump campaign were involved in a confrontation with Army staff at Arlington National Cemetery on Monday, while the former president took part in a photo session in a section for troops who have died in recent conflicts. The incident, which reportedly involved pushing an employee and verbal abuse, came as former President Donald Trump visited the cemetery to mark the 3-year anniversary of U.S. fallout of Afghanistan, where 13 service members were killed in a bombing at Kabul airport. NPR first reported that families of the two Marines killed at the airport invited Trump to Section 60 of the cemetery, where federal law prohibits political or campaign-related photography. NPR, citing a person with knowledge of the incident, said Trump's team verbally abused and pushed a staffer when that person attempted to block the photographer who was with the campaign. If you're a thug who hires thugs, that's the behavior one would expect. The cemetery released a statement confirming there was an incident and added that federal law prohibits political campaign or election related activities at any military cemetery, including photography in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced and widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. They are thugs. Okay, let's continue here. Steigen Bergen Greek. Yes, when Kamala wins, we must have a conversion, but atonement from MAGA. They're going to have to atone on their own. Look, my dear Steigen Berger Krieg, I used to be a sexist years ago, decades ago. I had to first admit that I was wrong. I was the idiot. I was the dummy. I was the uninformed, ill-informed. I was wrong. I wasn't looking for a pat on my back. It was me. And I've atoned for that. So much so that I've been declared an honorary woman by a women's group out here in Kingwood when we had the Women's March. But again, and the same applies to my being Latin from Panama, former homophobia. I've atoned decades ago, but it had to be me who who looked into my heart and saw the evil within, and only then could I extricate it. For all of you supporting Donald Trump that are closing your eyes to the evil and in the process harming your own kids, harming your own mother, your brother, your sister, and everybody, until you look into the mirror and atone for that, you know, then I tell you, then I can't even go there. Paul Plymouth says a decade ago, federal officials drafted a plan to discourage Medicare Advantage health insurance from overcharging the government by billions of dollars, only to abruptly back off amid an uproar from the industry. Newly released court file and show. I'll have to read that one, Paul Fleming. I didn't read that one yet, but I can imagine what it would say. All right, let's see what else we got here. Carl Cox says MAGA against rule of law and constitution. Trump and his followers are proof of that. Paul Fleming says, I thought here, South Carolina, Jack Smith presented this evidence to an entirely new grand jury. So a new group of American citizens doing their civic duty set and heard the evidence and returned a true bill against Trump for 4 charges in this superseding indictment. The good thing I feel about Donald Trump is after he loses in November, finally, at his old age of 78, he's going to have to see the light. And hopefully, just like we've locked up all the other thugs, we'll lock him up in jail. Okay, I want you guys to listen to Mike Rogers, and then we'll take it on the other side. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host, and today, sort of like a yearly event, once again, I'm with the one and only Mike Rogers. Mike, how are you doing today?
Good.
Who is Mike Rogers? Mike Rogers is the owner, publisher, you name whatever you want to call it, of RawStory. Yeah, that stuff that ends up in your mailbox every day, that stuff that gives you all this good information that many a times isn't covered by the traditional media. Mike, how are you doing today, my brother?
Good. Plugging along. You're in Baltimore, having a good time.
Yeah, and
family
well,
reunion.
Yeah, and it's like you see the same progressives out here
Fighting hard.
every year, fighting the battle and trying to win the battle. But a lot of times, Mike, while we're fighting the battle, we have a whole lot of strings that are holding us back. Some of it self-imposed, some of it not self-imposed. So here's the way I want to start this discussion. You are smack there, one of the top progressive media, if not the top progressive media out there. You're the top now, aren't you?
We are the largest.
You're the largest
progressive media website in the country.
Bar none.
Bar none.
And you did that the right way. You have people who write articles. You have people who go do some research. You bring on independent journalists that do some stuff. I mean, it is done where people interact with people and get things done.
Right.
That's the good thing. What's happening to the industry right now?
Well, as we see everywhere from small news sites all the way up to the Daily Beast, artificial intelligence has come for the news. I mean, they're targeted to the news. They know what they're doing. So many hundreds of millions of articles are being written by algorithms, stealing content from sites like ours that are doing the hard work. And it's really bad out there because these are people who want to flood the web with articles, with misinformation about the presidential campaign. So we're struggling in that vein. That's like kind of the outside forces. And then we look at what we would want to think was friendly forces, right? But once again, like we've seen year after year, I've been in this business 20 years, the establishment, the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, the DLCC, all of this, nobody is interested in spending any money outside of media that isn't Facebook or Google.
Why is that?
Why? Because they come in and they get these bargain basement rates based on signing these contracts. You know, it's all an insider game.
Right.
An example I give is, just on a small scale to think about it. In the LGBT community, about 20 years ago, there was this grant for $500,000 in advertising targeting LGBT people online to not smoke. Big campaign. Well, we have met with them about supporting 80 different news and blog sites and all this stuff and da-da-da-da. And then the next thing you know, the weekend comes and goes, and one outlet, the largest LGBT media company, does nothing other than magazines, got every dollar. And let me tell you why, okay? Because some guy in some office was told, you got to spend that budget by today. And they know, oh, let me pick up the phone and I'll call my friend and boom, 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 done, I'm off to the beach for the weekend. They don't care. That ad buyer couldn't care less. They're a functionary. Those people are the people who work at the DNC and take off on Columbus Day 2 weeks before a national election. Those are the people. Like,
Right.
they're not truly with us. They're not
Right.
converted. They're not. If they were with us, they'd work 3 weeks before election.
Right.
They wouldn't say, "Oh well, no." You give it and you take it afterward. But those warriors, they make too much not being real warriors and being the establishment.
You know, it's interesting because earlier I looked at you and I said, I think the problem is it's sort of not just a historic problem, but it's a problem of who we are economically. It's a problem of our economic system and who we consider the leaders, who we consider the ones given value, etc.
Right.
You just gave a good example of the guy who did a great big ad buy a couple of weeks before the election and then jump off with the profits he made from doing
Right.
that off to a vacation,
Right.
not caring about the message at all. Just getting
Not in the least.
just getting somebody who can give a big ad, the largest ad buy at the minimum cost.
Right.
That's what it is. That the profit.
don't-
Yeah.
They don't realize, like, they're so short-sighted. They're like, oh, ads this. It's like the idiots in DC. No, we're getting rid of this bus stop because the bus will be faster. Well, what about the 6 businesses outside the bus stop?
Exactly.
What about them? Why are you, like, really? One bus stop? You got to make a thing? Like, that kind of thing. And it's the same. We're talking, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars. If they took $5 million and threw it across the liberal media sphere, what would you do with $100,000 between now and the election?
It's interesting because I wanted, and that's the part of the discussion that I wanted to bring up with you. Here is what you've just made my case, and the issue is this: there are billions of dollars to get people aware of what needs to get done. And the funny thing about it is the people that get it done are the ones closest to community. So therefore, if you are close to community, why? Because you bring in independent journalists, not, let's say, the New York Times that only has a few editors and others. You bring in people from different types of communities that come into the fold. When they've spent their monies, they're going to go to the Facebook, who's going to take it all, as opposed to spreading it throughout the community, where technically speaking, you get a much bigger bang for your buck. And not only that, but you can actually segment the message in the form that the people you're trying to reach understand it.
Here's the bottom line, and I know a lot of people get upset when I say this. Folks should sit there and search on their computers, New York Times, why politicians probably don't need your money. And it's not about the politicians anymore. If it was about the politicians, Mitch McConnell, he had like $1 trillion against him. If it was about the money, Amy McGrath would be in the Senate. It's not about the money. It's about moving people. It's about getting people to be committed. It's about getting the stories out there. It's about you building the community online that you built. Is it as easy a metric to say, oh, 18,000 ads, 9,000, whatever it is? No, it's not. But there has to be a faith. You think that the right wing doesn't fund the Daily? They set up a foundation to fund their right-wing media.
Yes.
And they don't even make any bones about it. It's a nonprofit foundation called the Daily Caller Foundation.
Yes.
They make no bones about it. And with us, once again, I mean, I'm screaming into the wind.
Oh, no. Actually, I don't think you're screaming into the wind, because here's the other the other thing that I was telling you about. Right now, we all say channel your monies to these big organizations. What it is time for us to do is stop depending on the funders in that there's a bigger funding mechanism right there. And you know who showed it? Who started showing that? Bernie Sanders, and the way he funded, whether you like what he's doing now or not. If those of us in a select amount of us in this independent media space decide to say we don't need to suck on of these founders, but what we will do is really create communities that see us as an asset to them and start funding us. In what I'm doing in my little thing can never compare with the massive circulation that you have at RawStory, but it is being built one seed at a time.
Right. It's different.
And it does encompass even using those platforms we don't care about, but we leverage them We leverage them to do what we want them to do,
Right.
which is where I think when I look at RawStory, I look at RawStory as the template for taking over real media.
Well,
And I'm
appreciate
not.
that.
And this is not to be kind. I'm
Right.
saying that because of the prowess that you already have, if we get away from the capitalist mentality, in my humble opinion, and
Right.
start changing the paradigm, figuring out ways to change the paradigm, not saying, well, the DNC isn't doing this and the RNC, or while the RNC is, or whatever. Well, if the DNC isn't doing it, maybe we create our own daily caller. Maybe.
Well, that's what we are. I mean, we are.
No.
Right.
It's not the Daily Caller. The Daily Caller Foundation.
Well, yes, we've been
Okay.
trying. Right there, you go.
And I missed
But
the
no
word.
one will fund it.
Well,
That's the thing. They look at you and they go, "Oh well,
No. Here's the deal.
That's the problem.
You know, I remember there was a time in this business, right? I get a supporter who gave me $500 a month, and I was excited because it meant I didn't have to work so hard for the $2.99 a month that it costs, or the $4.99 that my average user did. And then I said to myself, "Oh my God, I need to work on my $4.99 supporter, the person who can give me a cup of coffee a month, as opposed to that guy who can take away that $500 at any time." And I think we build and you tell me, well, you have the mailing list. We build a democracy by trying to create that relationship. And I know to some it may sound like, what is the word? Fiction or wishful thinking or whatever. But democracy
Right.
ain't easy.
It's not. But you think that it's not easy, and we build our own roadblock. Like, that's the thing. It's so difficult, and then we're busy dropping roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. I mean, you have people out there now, and fill in the blank.
Right.
Okay? Whether it's gay rights,
Right.
it's environmental rights, it's the Gaza, it's Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every one of these issues, we need people to be involved in, right?
Right.
And what we're finding that, like, it gets lost in all of the mess.
Right.
That when it comes time to do the kind of community building that you're doing, without the right support, and the thing is that you're right. Like, the bang for your dollar putting into this,
Right.
compared to another, let's say, $5,000 for you, or $5,000 for another X hundreds of Facebook ads.
Mhm.
Come on, there's people who should know better, but they're judged on that.
Exactly.
And they work for companies that make profits on every ad they sell. They don't want to help you.
Exactly.
That's money away from the ads. So
And so what? But here's the thing. A lot of people, you have the option. We're almost done, but we have the option now with the platform that you have to educate and get people into knowing this sort of stuff. Because if we get to 2% of your platform, it is actually getting somewhere. So give me a closer, because I know you have some other meetings you got to attend.
I am very fearful for our democracy on so many levels right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything that I can encourage between now and November 4th, is it, or 6th? Don't worry, I'll be there.
Right.
Is to focus your energy solely on using these resources to get your friends to vote. When you see a story on RawStory about Project 2025 taking away minimum wage, or taking away overtime, or doing all of those things to people, you need those stories, you need these interviews to push. And every step of every way should be about two things: registering people to vote and getting their asses to the polls. Because that's all that matters. I tell people, I don't want to hear a negative word about our party right now. I get it. I'm not stupid. I've been a Democrat for 40
All
years.
your life, yeah.
Right, okay. Well, 1 week I
Okay.
wasn't, but that's
Okay.
okay. It gave me the realization how much I had to be. And for 40, all right, I get it. We hate each other. We're mad. You're angry. You want the environment, and you're worried about labor, and you want this, and I want this, and fine. Shut up. November 4th. Let's just get through. That's the advice I would give people.
Mike Rogers,
A pleasure.
owner, publisher, RawStory.
Go on.
Co-owner, publisher,
Gotta give my
RawStory.
business partner the credit.
Thank you so kindly, my brother. And look, let me tell you, we're going to win this fight.
I think we're gonna win
And it
this
doesn't
election.
and it doesn't end here.
Right.
It,
And I
it
think,
continues.
you know, the world is a lot smaller than we think.
Yes.
And when I see what happened in France the other day,
Yes.
and I see what happened in the UK, this gives me great hope that the world is saying, you know what, enough. You had your shot. Enough. You know. So,
brother, thank you for being on Politics
So
and
is
Right.
it-
Mike Rogers, have a
see,
good
I
one.
told you I'd be around.
Great. Yeah.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. That's Michael Rogers. He is the co-founder, and I think he's a co-founder and the owner of RawStory. That's the biggest progressive news rag, bar none. He's bigger than Daily Kos. He's bigger than most right-wing sites. But he wants us to know that there is an issue that we have to be concerned about. Okay, let's see what else we got here before I jump to the next. British MCP says the fact that so-called assassination attempt was done and no follow-up says something. You know, it makes you wonder a whole lot sometimes. Paul Fleming says the Supreme Court opted to keep President Joe Biden's latest plan to enact billions of student debt relief and lower payments on hold as lawsuits take their way through the lower courts. I agree with. I agree that now should become a part of. You know what? It should become a part of Kamala Harris's campaign. It must become a part of her campaign. And let me give you a shocker. Here is a Florida poll. Let me put it on the screen. It's going to be a shocker, guys. St. Pete Hall has a poll, shock for Republicans in Florida. Debbie McCarcel Powell, leading incumbent Republican U.S. Senator Rick Scott, 49-46. We may actually pick up a Florida senator the way things look. And remember, the real campaign hasn't started yet, and this billionaire who robbed Medicare, you know, that's who Rick Scott is. He is really, really going out there, and she's beating him. But you want to hear what's the other kicker? The same poll found Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris leading Republican nominee 51-46 within the Pinellas County District, and found Democratic Senate candidate leading incumbent 49-46. Joe Biden won about 51 of the district in 2020. Hey folks, look, we got to get and stay engaged. Okay, we got to stay engaged. We got to stay engaged. So let's remember, things are closing up. Florida is a +6, a R+6. In this kind of an election, we can overcome an R+6. It may be a bad poll, yeah, but we don't know. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But I told you all earlier on, I thought the fever would start breaking, and I believe in my gut that we were going to see a MAGA wipeout and also a landslide victory on the presidential level. Remember, I've been saying that for months. And everybody's been laughing and laughing and laughing. Oh, not possible. Even if you listen to the mainstream media today, you still hear it's going to be a close election. Remember, this is going to be a close election. Well, not anymore. Actually, the difference in dynamics, Mr. Hayes, is at this time, Hillary was on the top on the way down. Kamala is at the top with a trend line going up. Remember, there's a difference. Trend line, the specific poll doesn't matter. What matters are the trend lines, because the polls can be off, but the trend lines is what's important. The trend lines. All right, Tim Wise, another friend of mine. He's a racial justice warrior, is what I call him all of the time. A racial justice warrior. I want you to listen to him. Has a lot to say.
Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today we're honored to have the one and only Tim Wise.
Thank you.
Tim, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing all right. Good to see you again.
Hey, look, let me tell you, I've interviewed Tim a few times. Tim is what I call a truth teller on race, a truth teller even on economics, even though he's not an economics guy, but he has economic implementation.
Sure.
How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. Feeling good about being here, getting to talk to folks, seeing the resistance in action, so that's nice.
And I think it's great. But anyway, look, you are what many would consider a controversial dude.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on who you ask. I think whenever white men in particular spend 30 years of their life or 30 minutes of their life overtly challenging and speaking out against racism and white supremacy and structural and systemic racial injustice, it's not that it necessarily is controversial, but it is something people aren't used to, right? And so they can't quite figure out what to make of it. Why are you saying that? What are you saying? And so for some white folks, they'll view it as almost a form of
heresy.
Yeah, heresy or race treason or whatever. And for folks of color too, there's a certain suspiciousness, which I get, which is, why is this white guy talking about this stuff? What's in it for him? What's his angle? Because we have a history of white allyship and solidarity that hasn't been taught. Most white folks don't know that history, for instance. So we don't even understand that we as white people have a role to play in the undoing of systemic racism, because we haven't learned the stories of those people who were white, who were active in the movement, unless they were martyrs, right? So John Brown, sure. Goodman and Schwerner, sure. Viola Liuzzo, sure, but all those people were murdered for their actions. There are also a lot of white folks who did the work, who didn't die, who continue to do the work. And so I think if you don't know that, if someone like myself or other white folks who do this work come along, people just don't know what to make of it. And so it becomes controversial because it's odd to them, I suppose.
Right. Now, you've been doing this for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And you get some flack sometimes because, who are you to speak on this issue?
Right.
To which I actually say, you need to be speaking on this issue. Why? Because you're a part of this issue. Right. Now, how do you express to these people that are so defensive in the things that you have to say? Because I don't think, how do you handle the comments like, you don't need to talk about that because I didn't do this to them.
Right.
It were the guys of the past that do it. And how do you address that?
Well, first of all, we all learn Newton's first law of motion in elementary school or middle school, inertia, right? What happens, an object in motion tends to remain in motion. And that's not just true of the physical universe. It's true of the socioeconomic and the political. So what happens in one generation affects the next and the next. I'm very aware that none of the people in my audiences, nor I myself, are the ones who created the system of white supremacy. I know how old we are. The system's been around for hundreds of years. But I realize that we've inherited the legacy of that. Just like if you become the CEO of a corporation, you don't get to go in and say, wow, look at all these assets that the last CEO accumulated, and then the CFO brings you the ledger and says, well, but here are the outstanding debts. You don't get to go, oh, but I didn't take out those loans. Those weren't my debts. You have to take care of the debts if you're going to take advantage of the assets. And in this country, I think a lot of folks, particularly in the white community, have decided we're going to use all the assets that have been accumulated over centuries, including centuries of overt racial oppression. Not just today, but the times that virtually everyone acknowledges that, yes. And we're going to use those assets and we're going to take advantage of all that good stuff that has been afforded to us as a country, but we're not going to pay the debt side of the ledger. That's what equity work is about. It's about realizing you have to be responsible for the world that you find, even when you're not guilty for finding it the way that you find it.
I think that is best. It's best expressed the way you said it, because a lot of people don't get it. A lot of white people right now are in fact living off of the assets of your forefathers, whether they're guilty for it or not.
Right.
And as such, let me change it this way. So what are your thoughts then on reparations?
I think reparations are a moral imperative, and we have an obligation to discuss what that's going to look like and how that's going to work. And I don't think anyone has a clear path forward for doing that, either politically or practically. But the moral imperative of repairing the damage done by the system of enslavement and segregation, Jim Crow, I think is really not debatable. There is a price to be paid, and it has to be paid by the country that allowed, and those institutions that allowed that history to exist because we do inherit that legacy. And so what does that mean? Well, I think reparations should be systemic, my personal vision of it, because the injury was systemic. So it's not about cutting checks to individuals. I think white people get this impression when they hear the term reparations, like, oh my God, I'm going to have a line item on my Quicken, or, it's like water bill, electric bill, black people bill. And that's not what anyone's talking about. Right. We're talking about the government that made possible the elevation of white people to the detriment of black people, pay up for that injury. And we've done it. What's interesting is we've done that kind of big project for white folks before. I mean, in a sense, the New Deal programs that were largely off limits to black folks, at least for the first 20 years, the FHA programs that allowed 35 million white folks to get loans, mostly in suburbs where black and brown folks couldn't live. All that was big government. It was government saying we have an obligation to provide opportunity to people who haven't had it. Now, in that case, it was white working class people. Right. And that was a good idea. But if we can do that for white working class people, why can't we say, hey, you know what? There were some folks who were left out of those things, and we have an obligation to make that right. That's just basic moral justice. Now, we can all debate and disagree about how it gets done in practice and what it looks like, but we ought to at least be able to come together on the moral principle that you don't get to avoid reparation just because we've been running out the clock for hundreds of years. Right?
It is amazing because I think when folks look at it that way, it is possible for them to say, I can understand it. The problem is that there aren't many people that these people respect. Many out there that these people, because what I talk about all of the time is, if I go out there to a white audience and I start talking about reparations, the first thing folks see is who I am, my hue, and look at it with suspicion, right?
Of course.
Oh, of course you're going to want to take my money. If a guy like you goes out there, there's one wall that you don't have to immediately break down before people start listening to you.
That's right.
And when you given that you don't have that wall, they can then listen to your analysis.
That's right.
And that is what you just broke down there. An analysis that says, look, this is what has happened and this is why it needs to be systemic. How can we educate more? Because it seems like the folks need to be educated. Once you're educated, you decide if you want to do wrong or right.
Right. Well, part of it is we have to obviously resist the attempt to whitewash history and the attempt to weaponize colorblindness against all measures of equity efforts. I mean, part of the problem is if you don't teach the history, some of that I just broke down, a very minor thumbnail sketch of our history. If you don't learn that, then of course you're going to think reparations is just a grift that black folks are running to take white people's money. If you don't understand that black folks' money was already taken, like this is not asking for something that wouldn't have been there. This is asking to be put back into a position more like the one you would have been in had the money not been pre-stolen, right? So people say it's redistribution, but there was pre-distribution. You understand? And if you pre-distribute the resources, taking from black and brown folk and hoarding those resources in the white community, when black folks are like, hey, can we get some of that back? That's not some unjust thing. That's actually saying, no, you were unjustly enriched. You shouldn't have had those resources in the first place. And I know people will say like, well, I'm struggling economically. Well, the good thing about reparations is if it's done through the tax code, which it would be, right? The poorest white folks in the country aren't actually going to be paying into it because they aren't paying income taxes.
And also they'll get a benefit.
They'll actually, two things. One, since they are usually not making enough to have to pay income taxes in the first place, they won't actually see anything coming out of their income for it. And secondly, they will benefit because when that money is put into the hands of black folks who are also disproportionately working class, now what are they going to do? They're going to spend that money. That's going to stimulate the economy that working class white people also depend on. That's going to seed black and brown, black owned businesses that are going to hire some of those white folks. That's going to improve the schools that not only black kids go to, but white kids go to. That is going to improve the healthcare delivery systems that we all depend on. So the white folks who are going to say, well, I haven't really benefited. Look, I'm poor and I grew up, whenever we talk about white privilege, we all know white folks, all of a sudden, we all believe that we are, coal miners' daughters, and we're all born in the hills and hollers of Eastern Kentucky. Well, some of us were born in those spaces, but if we have been left poor by the class system, we ought to be joining with black folks to try to get reparations because those reparations are going to uplift the working class as a whole. they're not going to come out of our taxes. They're going to come disproportionately out of the taxes of more affluent people, the ones who have benefited the most, because that's who pays, as they never fail to remind us, a disproportionate amount of the overall income taxes. So fine, it's not going to be poor white folks. It's not going to be working class white folks. It's going to be the folks who are doing just fine and who have benefited the most from the structure the way it exists right now.
Tell us about Bacon Rebellion in your words.
Well, the reason Bacon's Rebellion is important, right, is that it really is the pivotal moment in colonial history when the elite of that era, Governor Berkeley in Virginia, realized that there was a problem brewing. And the problem was that, poor folks, indentured servants, and enslaved Africans could look around and they could see, like, we're all being screwed. We're all being screwed by the rich. None of us own land. They don't have love for any of us. And so you had these poor peasant class, what we would now call white and black folks, but they weren't called that yet, joining forces to overthrow that arrangement, that aristocracy. And in the wake of that, the elite said, no. And that's when they begin to talk about the white race. That's when they begin to talk about whiteness as almost like a form of property, to quote Cheryl Harris. That's when whiteness becomes a thing that is used to take all of these poor Europeans who had no love for the rich back in England. I mean, they were peasants. They had no love for one another. All these disparate Europeans had spent most of their history killing each other, because that was the history of Europe. The history of Europe was killing each other and looking for the witch. That was pretty much what we did in Europe. Oh, yeah. And we get here in the colonies and it's like, oh, but now we got to get all these poor people on our team, because if we don't, they're going to join with those other poor people and take our stuff. And so that trick of whiteness begins in 1676, or right after Bacon's Rebellion, and it is continuing to plague us to this day. It's why poor white Southerners were willing to go and die in the Civil War to maintain the property interest of rich white Southerners. The rich said why they were seceding. They said it was to maintain white supremacy and enslavement. So if you're a poor white person and you don't own slaves, as you would never stop telling us, right? My family didn't even own slaves. Well, then why the hell were they fighting for the ones that did? Why? Well, but our way of life. What do you mean our way of life? Their way of life was owning other human beings and undermining the wage base for working class white people. Because if you're white and you got to charge $1 a day to work on the farm, and they can get a black guy to do it for free because they own him, your white ass is not going to get the job, right? Exactly right? So you should have been joining to overthrow the system. But whiteness said, oh no, you're on our team. You've got our uniform. You're wearing our gear. And you may not get in the game. We don't really like you. You're at the end of the bench. You're a sub at best, right? But at least you can call yourself white. You can feel better than somebody. And unfortunately, that continues to plague a lot of people today.
I think that message is so important. That the division that they've created, and I think the reason why you see a lot of rich now supporting a Donald Trump is because they realize, hey, Bacon's Rebellion created this policy, these things that worked. Yeah. Maybe we have to reinstitute it. That's why we got to get rid of DEI. That's why we got to get rid of affirmative action. That's why we need to get rid of all these things, because now we can create that separation again that allows us to maintain what our economic system depends on to maintain that separation.
Well, two good examples of that. I mean, the debate about immigration. Notice what the right says. They don't just say immigrants are coming taking white people's jobs, right? Donald Trump just said they're taking black jobs. Now, we can get into a whole conversation about what he thinks of when he thinks of black jobs. But isn't it interesting? That pivot is about trying to turn black folks against brown folks, right? And then the affirmative action case out of Harvard, who were the plaintiffs? Asian students. It wasn't the angry white girl like Abigail Fisher at Texas, who was, Becky with the bad grades or whatever, her nickname was. They didn't pick another white plaintiff because they realized if you use white people complaining about victimization, at some point people go, really? But you take some Asian folks, you say, oh, we're not racist, see? But what they're doing is they're turning Asian folks against black folks, ignoring the fact that Asian Americans, for example, who have a college degree are still about 15% more likely to be out of work than white folks with a degree, even when they majored in the same subject. So it isn't just black folks that are being underemployed relative to their qualifications. It's not just Latino folks that are being underemployed. It is also Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. But if I tell you the reason you're hurting is that black person took your gig at MIT or they took your slot at Harvard, then you're not going to pay attention to the fact that your income is also less than it ought to be. Your occupational status is less than it ought to be. We always talk about Asian folks all doing so well in America. But if you actually look at the places where Asian Americans are most populated, they have poverty rates that are 2 to 2.5 times the white rates. Yeah. The only reason that the Asian American overall economic picture looks better is because Asian Americans, 60% live in some of the wealthiest parts of the country that have higher income. But when you disaggregate that, Asian Americans are actually struggling, facing discrimination, facing hate in the wake of COVID, facing all kinds of racism. But if you tell them, oh, your problem is black people, your problem is DEI, then you don't have to deal with any of that. Right. So, right.
Well, look, my brother Tim Wise.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so
thank you.
kindly. Because let me tell you, we need your work, and we need guys like you doing this work. So I hope in the process you're multiplying.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
It's the only salvation we have to the damn country.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
that.
For
the work you do, brother.
Hey, you too, my man.
Peace.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number 1, subscribe to our channel, and number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join. Politics done right, I'm Egberto.
I'm back. Absolutely join, folks. Anyway, let's see what we got here. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I have a whole lot more interviews of consequence with you. Let's see what you guys were saying. Para ver. Paul Fleming says, before, Brit says, what is great about good deep thinkers is when they get info, they can change their minds. One party cannot do that. Exactly. Lee Grant says Tim Wise is the Pope of white guilt. No, he's the Pope of truth. Let's see what else we got here. Para ver. Lee Grant also said no good pathway for reparations. Actually, there is, and I think Tim Wise explained it quite well. Bree says white slaves owners got paid, so it's amazing, isn't it? They got reparations for losing their property. What was their properties? Folks that look like me. Wow. How comes you don't feel any kind of a disgust towards that? Peggy Lopez says, I have told people about the white Pennsylvanian farmer who left his farm, wife and children to go to war to free the slaves. Surprise reaction shows me how little we have learned in our history. True. Let's see what else we got here. Paul Fleming says Joy Reid compares the drastically different ads released on the same day from vice presidential candidate Harris and former President Trump. It is given Home Shopping Network vibes in a bad way. Reid says in response to Trump's ad, yeah, Trump is selling cards to his sycophants. His sycophants are going to continue to enrich Donald Trump buying his card. Guess what he's going to put in the card, guys? A little piece of his suit that he wore when he had the debate with. It's hard to believe. A United States president is cutting up the suit that where he debated Biden, putting it in a card and selling it for one card $99. I think a pack $1,500. And guess what? You will have sycophants buying that crap. That's a cult. And that's a danger, folks. That's a cult and a danger. All right, let's continue here. Para ver. Egberto Willis well said. Perfect. Compared to today with migrants informing. Yep, whites won't do it. Just complain. That is true. Very true. All right, what else have we got here? Paul Fleming says, if Trump sells his shares of DJIT stock next month, it will be a good sign that he doesn't think it's going to win. Look, that is very true. But I think he has to sell it now because he's not going to win, but people haven't cauterized in their minds yet that he won't win. All right, so we've got to, I won't be surprised if he starts unloading probably 100,000 shares at a time starting now. Because every 100,000 shares give him what, $500 million or something like that? Or what is it? $500 million? I don't remember how much it is. Or maybe it's I don't remember. I got to figure out what the stock price is. It's found support at 20, but I doubt it holds. Oh, it's at 20 now. So 20 at 100,000, that would be $2 million. Okay. Not a lot for what he needs. All right, let's see. Egberto Willis at Arlington Cemetery. He wanted $50 a photo with him. Are you serious? Please tell me that's a joke. Breach, please tell me that is a joke. Please. Please tell me that is a joke. I want to hear that that's a joke. I want to hear that's a joke. I couldn't believe that he would do that. Oh, it's 4 o'clock. Hey, folks, please remember to support the program. How can you support the program? Oh boy. I tell you what, folks, please support the program. And how can you support the program? I'm going to have one ask today. Please support the program by becoming a subscriber. By becoming a subscriber to our newsletter at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Again, that is politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. And become a paid subscriber. And with that, you get access to all our books. You can read all our books online. And you know what our books are. So anyhow, I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willis. I love you all. Thank you all for being here. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willis. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willis. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.